Hi, my name is Xiao, and I am a PhD candidate at the University of California, Berkeley. Today, I'm going to present our paper on applying restorative justice to address interpersonal harm in online gaming communities. Online interpersonal harm refers to harm that occurs between two or more individuals. The individuals affected are referred to as the survivors, while the offending party is termed the perpetrators. Such harm is prevalent on social media platforms, with common examples including discrimination, game toxicity, and non-consensual image sharing. Online platforms currently address these harms through content moderation. It adheres to principles of punitive justice, which believes that perpetrators should receive punishment from regulators in proportion to the offense. For instance, if a user utters offensive words in violation of the platform's rules, the offending content may be removed or the user may be banned. Online platforms invest heavily in content moderation. However, this approach does not effectively stop harm. In the United States, a significant number of people are harmed every year, and incidents of severe harm are still on the rise. We believe that alternative approaches are necessary. What might these look like? Looking closely at content moderation, it becomes apparent that survivors and affected community members are often left out of the picture. In our work, we explored another justice framework that balances the scales of punitive justice by focusing on the healing and restoration of those affected, known as restorative justice. It is a time-tested approach that centers on the needs of survivors for support and healing, offers perpetrators an opportunity to understand their wrongdoing and repair the harm, and invites community members to collectively address the harm. A common tool of restorative justice is the victim-offender conference, which is a structured conversation leading towards a recovery plan. Restorative justice has been successfully applied in offline contexts such as the criminal justice system and the education system. However, its application online is not straightforward, and its success in this new context is uncertain. In this research, we interrogated the needs, opportunities, and challenges of applying restorative justice online. We employed two main tools of inquiry. First, we evaluated the current content moderation practices through the lens of the three restorative justice principles. Second, we sought to understand people's preferences for implementing a victim-offender conference in their own online communities. We conducted our study within the context of the Overwatch online gaming community, involving survivors, perpetrators, and moderators. In this presentation, we focus on how those three groups perceive the gaming community in relation to restorative justice principles and the implications for design. Before proceeding, we would like to issue a warning that some examples we will show may contain offensive language. Restorative justice centers on the needs of survivors. In traditional offline restorative justice processes, after harm has occurred, survivors typically share their stories, receive emotional support, and provide input on what is needed to repair the harm. How is experiencing harm like in an online game? Let's consider an example. Vivi joined a voice chat with two other players in an Overwatch game. Once she spoke, revealing her gender, the other players began harassing her for the duration of the game. Unfortunately, Vivi had no means to exit the situation mid-game, and the harassment continued even after the game ended. We discovered that for survivors like Vivi, the primary tool to address harm is reporting to the moderation system. However, victims often feel excluded from the decision-making process after reporting a harm case and frequently do not receive feedback on the outcome. Furthermore, the process does little to aid in healing from the harm, even in cases of severe emotional distress. Additionally, many survivors reported that despite their attempts to report their offenders, they continued to experience harm within the community, where a culture of harm is prevalent. In summary, when content moderation remains the dominant approach, we identify a critical need for providing support and healing for survivors and for changing the community culture in the long term to prevent harm from occurring. Now, let's focus on the perpetrators of harm. From a restorative justice standpoint, perpetrators can amend harm by acknowledging their wrongdoing, making reparations, and altering their future behaviors. Our interviews with these court moderators revealed a tendency towards restorative mindset. They aim at assist perpetrators in recognizing their missteps and encourage behavioral change by offering second chances and providing rationales for sanctions. Nonetheless, the reliance on a punitive moderation system and rule-based explanations may not effectively facilitate perpetrators' learning and support. In our research, we examined a case involving a transgender woman who repeatedly expressed her disdain for cisgender men in a Discord channel, causing discomfort among other users. The moderators attempted to mitigate the situation using various punitive measures, such as warnings and bans. The transgender woman often defended her stance on oppression, which ultimately led to her permanent ban. We contend that punitive actions distract perpetrators from comprehending the impact of their actions on survivors, rendering them defensive rather than reflective. Moreover, the specific harm caused by the transgender woman mirrors her previous sufferings at the hands of cisgender men. Restorative justice recognized the importance of addressing perpetrators' past experiences of harm through supportive measures. While past harms do not excuse offenses, they can make ceasing harmful behavior challenging without opportunities for healing. Despite evidence suggesting that punitive measures contribute to maintaining community content health by deterring repeat offenses, as indicated by moderators, reliance solely on punishment proves to be ineffective. Instead, we advocate for an approach that educates perpetrators about the consequences of their actions, encouraging reflection on the harm caused rather than focusing exclusively on punitive measures. Restorative justice believes that harmful actions can disrupt relationship within a community and potentially affects all its members. Thus, it is crucial for community members to recognize the harm and engage collectively in its redress. However, our findings indicate that in many instances of online harm, the involved stakeholders lacked a shared sense of community. Consequently, the harm was often perceived as someone else's problem and remained unaddressed. Furthermore, when community members did become involved, their actions sometimes produced secondary effects that further harm both survivors and perpetrators, such as dismissing or questioning survivors' experiences or attempting to achieve justice by punishing the perpetrator with threats and bullying. Based on these observations, we think that it is important to establish a strong sense of community. It is equally important to develop structures and disseminate knowledge on how bystanders can effectively address harm. This approach not only aids in healing, but also fosters a proactive and supportive community environment. Now, we contextualize the practice of restorative justice within the content moderation landscape, discussing both the challenges and opportunities it presents. First, we identified several challenges to implementing online restorative justice. These include implementation challenges and labor demands, such as training moderators and organizing conferences. We argue that the resources from companies, along with the initiative from knowledgeable community members, are crucial for initiating restorative justice in online communities. In addition, rather than adding to the workload, restorative justice necessitates a reallocation of efforts from a punitive focus to one of care for both survivors and perpetrators, leveraging existing restorative justice practices. Moreover, successful online restorative justice, by more effectively preventing harm, could ultimately reduce moderation labor in the long run. Despite the unmet needs within the current moderation system, many moderators and survivors still lean towards punitive justice, viewing punishment as the most effective or only measure. Some perpetrators also anticipate punishment. Educating the community on the diversity of justice processes may alleviate doubts and foster openness to change. What's more, restorative justice requires first-hand experiences for individuals to understand, adapt to their needs, and recognize its effectiveness. In future work, we plan to collaborate with online communities to implement and evaluate restorative justice practices. Another challenge is the limited accountability of perpetrators in online spaces. Our interviews revealed that, due to the finite scope of moderation in many contexts and the technical limitations of online communities, perpetrators can often easily evade punishment. Thus, it is imperative to explore what accountability means to the community and how to ensure individuals are held accountable within the existing moderation framework. If perpetrators can bypass punitive consequences and do not feel a sense of belonging to the community where the harm occurs, engaging them in any processes, punitive or restorative, that holds them accountable becomes significantly more challenging. We think that there are opportunities for online communities to adapt and apply restorative justice practices. It is crucial to meet online communities and platforms where they are. This involves designing restorative justice mechanisms tailored to their resources, culture, and socio-technical affordances. For example, moderators have the opportunity to incorporate restorative justice language into their explanations of moderation decisions. Currently, such explanations often emphasize punitive consequences, which shifts focus away from the survivors towards the moderation system itself. We advocate for a pivot towards explanations that underscore the impact of the perpetrators on survivors and promote accountability. Exploring restorative justice conferences, we acknowledge instances where perpetrators or survivors might be unwilling or unable to participate in direct dialogues. To address this, a pre-conference process involving only the interested parties could be initiated. Similar to offline pre-conferencing, facilitators can pose reflective questions to help perpetrators or survivors contemplate the harm, thus fostering opportunities for healing and learning. For example, a perpetrator may wish to apologize to a survivor who prefers not to meet directly but is open to communicating through a facilitator. If both parties demonstrate a willingness to engage, moderators can facilitate a victim offender conference promoting direct communication and concerted efforts to address the harm caused. In addition, when online community members are willing to engage in the process of addressing harm, online platforms can also engage in circles to invite a broader discussion about online harm and how the community can shift towards a healthier community culture. We advocate for the incorporation of restorative justice goals and practices as integral components of the governance structure in online spaces. Restorative justice conferencing proves most effective when participation is voluntary and all involved parties are committed to the process. This approach acknowledges the diversity of justice perceptions, which vary significantly across individuals due to their personal identities and online behavior patterns. It underscores the importance of customizing the restorative justice approach for each specific incident of harm, taking into account the unique preferences of survivors and perpetrators to facilitate a meaningful solution. For cases where restorative justice may not be suitable, it is vital to have a robust governance framework in place, providing clear alternatives such as muting or banning to prevent future harm. This strategy reflects the decision-making process in traditional restorative justice systems, which employ specific criteria to assess the appropriateness of cases for restorative justice methods and dictate alternative actions when restorative approaches are not viable. Choosing to implement restorative justice within an online community signifies a commitment to the community's core values. While both restorative and punitive justice systems seek to address and deter harm, their approaches to achieve justice differ. Traditional content moderation, with its punitive leanings, focuses on regulating content and penalizing offenders based on the severity of their actions. In contrast, restorative justice emphasizes meeting the needs of survivors, encouraging the rehabilitation of perpetrators, and repairing the broader harm caused to the community. By weaving restorative justice practices into a moderation system, the aim is not just to enforce rules, but to foster a community culture that prioritizes healing, understanding, and positive transformation. That's the end of the talk. Thank you.